General, thank you so much for joining CNBC.
Sure.
I want to kick off by asking you to take a step back and think about the events of the last several days. Does the death of Qasem Soleimani make this region safer?
Yeah, I think so. I think it's clear that the regime in Iran's had a very bad couple of weeks. And one of the things that people don't talk about too much is the degree of unrest that there is in the country, which I think is significant. So you couple
and even more protests over the weekend.
Exactly. So you take the removal of Soleimani, you take the accidental downing of the civilian aircraft, coupled with the amount of popular unrest, the needle towards possible collapse of a regime, it has to be something that people think about. It's probably not politically correct to talk about it, but you have to think about it.
How close do you think we are to that?
That's hard to say, but I think, I think the needle has moved more in the direction in the last year towards that possibility than ever before, with a combination of the sanctions, the relative isolation of the regime, and some catastrophic decisions that they made, assuming that we weren't going to respond, which turned out to be a very, very bad decision. The loss of one of their key implementers and designers of outsourcing terror in the world. This has not been a real successful time for them. So I do think things have changed. I think that the president's declaration that we would hold them responsible not only for what they do, but what their proxies do. If we're serious about that, that's another pretty good indication that there's a new game in town.
There's been a great deal of attempt in the United States, in Washington in particular, to really politicize this. And some of the comments on both sides of the aisle, frankly,
right.
And the Democrats, many of them suggesting even that this was a mistake to take out Soleimani. When you take a step back here and think about this within the breadth of your experience, at any time since 1979, have we ever been this close to seeing a different leadership in Iran?
No. For those who, I align myself with those who think that the regime is incapable, is just incapable of doing what we would want them to do. In other words, to be peaceful and to integrate into the region and to operate under kind of the normal civilized way of doing business. That is not going to happen with this regime. So it's going to have to be, and I think it'll be internally generated. I think if there's a revolution, it'll come from inside. But it's the whole combination of things: sanctions, military action when necessary, diplomatic isolation. This is a country that has a GDP the size of the state of Maryland, roughly. They command much too much of the world's attention for what they actually are. The people of Iran are great. They have great potential. They deserve better than what they've received for the last 40 years. And I hope I'm around long enough to see it happen.
Have you been surprised by the reaction from European governments since the implementation of maximum pressure? There was a lot of pushback.
There are two reactions in Europe. One is Western Europeans and the other the Eastern Europeans. For whatever reason, Eastern Europeans and the United States kind of see things eye to eye in terms of threats and Russian behavior, etc. Western Europeans seem to want to go the way of appeasement and don't rock the boat, and we need diplomacy to make this go away. And as a result of that, nothing changes. I mean, under that way of doing things, Iran will continue to be Iran, Russia will continue to be Russia, and there won't be any change. But I think in this region, there's for the first time in a long time, there's a real possibility of serious change. But a lot of it will depend on whether the United States is serious about what the president said, and I think he is serious. And if we do that, I think there's real good possibility for major changes in the region.
When you look at what happens next, not just in this part of the world, but more globally, some of the threats to America's national security, what comes to mind for you? Are we talking about the rise of China, what's happening in the energy markets, this sort of changing paradigm just in the Middle East itself?
Well, this conference has been about energy, and I've been a big believer in the fact that energy security is as important as anything else. And when I was in the White House with President Obama, I always wanted to see the Energy Secretary at the table in the Situation Room, regardless of the situation, because energy affects everything. The United States is in an enviable position of having, I don't like the word energy independence, but we have become self-sufficient a little bit. But that doesn't mean that because we have ours that we ignore everybody else. As a matter of fact, I think the fact that we have such a good potential in terms of leadership in the world, I believe that nations like ours who have a lot of energy should really focus on the have-not countries who are developing, help them skip the pollution stage in their development with technology, and really show the contrast and difference between a democratic approach, a free approach to using energy, and say what Russia does. So there's a clear opportunity for the United States to show leadership, which affects climate, it affects everything we do. But it's really exciting to be able to see where we've come in such a short period of time. On the other hand, I think the most serious threat to the United States is China, and I think China has been very clear about what its long-term goals are strategically, and we need to take that very seriously. I think we should compete with them everywhere they are in the world, including Africa and other places. And on technology, that even gets to be more serious, because if China successfully captures the infrastructure aspects of the 5G emergence, that's about, that affects the GDP of countries significantly, anywhere from 1.5 to 2.5%. And so this is a competition that I think the United States can win, because we have a completely different philosophy about what the 5G world would look like, and we have a completely different marketing strategy, and I think we're going to be successful.
Are you encouraged by how the trade talks are going? They've completed phase one, they say.
Yeah, I think trade.
Was this the right way to go about it?
To be fair, one of the things that concerns me a little bit is that we've stopped talking about values in the world, and even in the democratic countries, we used to talk about human rights. In the Cold War, there was the oppression of the people, and wouldn't the people be better off with a more democratic society? I regret that we sometimes appear to sacrifice trade for values, and that the values coefficient is less important. There are
Someone ascribed that to the Doctrine.
There are 1 million Muslims in China who are basically incarcerated right now. And you can call it whatever you want, but they're some form of a concentration camp. You really have to scratch the surface to find a government that's talking about that. But it's emblematic of what the Chinese system is. Total control of their own people, and using technology, they're making astonishing progress to control every single citizen, whatever he or she does, and they're giving grades for citizenship, which will affect the jobs you can hold, the travel you can do, and everything else. So where they're moving is scary. They obviously want to export that to other countries, and so it's a Trojan horse effect where they penetrate the economies, they buy up everything they can, pay off everybody they can, and then get a chokehold on the economy as much as they can, and then make demands for the behavior of the government. And that's happening in many parts of the world.
Should the United States be more supportive of those in Hong Kong who are protesting China's rising influence?
I think so. I think we should support expressions of freedom wherever there's oppression. We should do it in
even if that puts a trade talk at risk.
Yeah, again, this proposition: is trade more important than human values? And I think the United States has always, during the Cold War, we didn't trade with the Soviet Union. We didn't trade with them until the Berlin Wall came down and the Soviet Union collapsed. But in China's case, we were asleep at the switch. They were making astonishing progress, and all of a sudden they're pure competitors. And I'm not sure that we really understand the degree to which China is strategically intent on replacing the United States as the most dominant culture in the world.
When you say we were asleep at the wheel, who was? President Bush? President Obama?
I think the series of administrations. I mean, fixated on the Middle East, fixated on the Iran-Iraq wars, the Afghanistan.
Do you believe that we should be pulling troops out of Afghanistan and Iraq?
That's hard to say.
Because the Iraqis seem like they really don't want us there anymore.
I mean, one of the keys to Afghanistan is Pakistan. And when I was in the Obama administration, the Pakistani government, which was really run by the army, was deceitful. They knew where Osama bin Laden was, and they wouldn't tell us. They would agree with us to do certain things, and they'd never do it. And they, in my view, they did not actively help us stabilize Afghanistan. Safe havens in Pakistan caused us a lot of problems, and as far as I know, they still might be.
Yes.
I think Ashraf Ghani is the best hope for the country. I know him very well. He's a very decent man. He's a patriot. And he deserves to be supported. I don't know that we can do that forever, but Hadley, I've been around a long time, and one of my favorite mottos is virtual presence is actual absence. And that means that if you think you can virtually affect things without investing, presence of some sort, I think that's a mistake. And if the U.S. withdraws, it creates vacuums, and immediately those vacuums will be replaced by people that don't have our best interests at heart. And that's why I think, the presence all over the world of our unified commands of PACOM, CENTCOM, EUCOM, NORTHCOM, SOUTHCOM, AFRICOM, those are very, very important instruments for peace and stability in the world and economic opportunity.
Are you happy that the president has decided to bring more troops to the Middle East?
Yeah, I think so. I think there's a perception here in the Middle East. It's better than during the Obama administration, but it's not quite where it should be. They're just not convinced that we'll be there if they really need us. And I think we need to resolve that. Just say, here's what's going to happen.
And the death of Soleimani hasn't reset that?
Sorry?
And the death of Soleimani hasn't reset that?
I think privately, behind closed doors, everybody's fist bumping and doing high fives. They won't say it publicly. We all understand that, and we shouldn't do it either. But this is a game changer. I mean, this is a temporary game changer, at least. I think if I were the Iranian regime, I would be back on my heels right now with the downing of the aircraft, loss of Soleimani, popular unrest, increased sanctions, increased isolation. I mean, they're not having a good day. This is not something that they had envisioned. So I think we keep up what we're doing, and we'll see what happens. But at the same time, I think we should shore up our commitments to our friends and allies in the region. And because if we don't, China will. And And that's the competition. That's the competition. And obviously, Russia plays now into the mix as well.
Final question. We've talked so often in the last several years about the Bush Doctrine versus the Obama Doctrine. To you, what is the Trump Doctrine? Is it shock and awe?
Well, it's obviously government by tweets. And I can't articulate. I can't necessarily articulate it, but I will say this: that I think what the administration did in the Soleimani case is absolutely correct. I think it's the right thing to do.
Do you wish that you had done it?
Sorry?
Do you wish that you had done it in your time in government?
Well, I think we were doing it in the sense that we were really looking hard for Osama bin Laden. While I was in the White House, we found the house that he was in. It took another year to be pretty sure that he was there. So I think the Obama administration tried to find the terrorist that was the most wanted guy in the world. Soleimani is now the next guy. So I give him credit for doing that, and I think it was the right thing to do. And I think it's, as articulated by the president, it's a potential game changer. I would not let up, though. I would not let up, and I would not listen to the appeasers of the world who kind of want to calm the waves and let's get back to normal business. And then you have Iran using its proxies to spread terror around the world and interdict shipping, shoot down drones and things like that. Those days, I think, are over, and I hope Iran understands that.
Do you believe that our allies in this part of the world should vocally back us up on this?
Yes.
Because we've seen them in the last several months having back-channel conversations, trying to calm the situation with Iran. Is that a mistake, or is that something that they have to do?
I think there's two messages. One is the public message because of the proximity of Iran. I mean, I think that this part of the world looks at Iran the way that we should, and that it's an existential threat and a very close nearby threat. So that's concerning. On the other hand, in the private discussions behind the scenes, I'm hopeful that the U.S. and our allies here are actually working hard to make sure that they know that we are supportive. I think the region should seriously think, as you and I have talked about a couple of years ago now, I think, a NATO-like organization here in the Gulf, one that's, and I know they have this MESA organization, but I know the big NATO would be happy to help them do that. I don't think we should bring NATO troops in here to do that, but I think it can help our friends and allies in the region to save a lot of money and become much more effective, much more interoperable, and in the face of an existential threat, provide a better share of their own security, with us being, supportive.
Do you believe that there's a chance that in the annals of history, the Trump administration, the Trump presidency, could end up being, against all odds, one of the most successful of the 21st century?
In the Middle East?
Yeah.
I guess, I think it's possible. This was a powerful step. We'll see where it goes. It's a complicated region, but I think history will say that this was the right thing to do.
General, thank you so much for joining CNBC.
Thank you. Thanks, Hadley.